It has expanded over the years. We have added, initially we added items like fleet forecast. We added major maintenance because we felt like, although it wasn't a capital improvement schedule, it was still important information, the major efforts that we take, for example, for tree trimming or pole inspections, those sorts of things. So we kind of made a separate schedule for that. You'll see similarly this year, we also expanded our CIP report to include planning. We have a number of planning and engineering projects in the works, and we feel like that is especially important because the result of those studies are capital projects in many cases. So we've added a whole section of planning as part of the CIP program. I do want to take the opportunity to tell you that this is to council, this is a strong committee. This is a committee that has been engaged in your community either through other civic organizations, through other city committees, on city council, and the engagement and the input from this committee, I think, is extremely valuable. In terms of our agendas, I think the one thing right off the bat that we took a look at is where have we been and where have we gone, because a lot of times we'll get the comment, we've had the retaining walls on the CIP schedule forever, we haven't gotten anything done, or we have the 3rd Street Bridge on the CIP project. We've had Avenue E on the CIP schedule for 6-7 years now. And so one of the things that we did right off the bat is we took a look at where we've been from basically 2013 to today. And if you look at it in total, it's a very impressive course that this city, through the CIP committee and council, has taken. We've gotten a lot of great things done. We've had a lot of discussion regarding planning and engineering projects that will affect future CIP schedules, and for the prime example of that will be our pre-treatment plant. We've included technology and planning projects. Through one of our agenda items, we took a closer look at the hostess house and talked about that in relationship to development of a new facility. Taking a look at the Calvert building, take a look at preventative maintenance. We've also discussed, a plan for how we want to make our signage more consistent and more traveler-friendly. There are also a number of other things that we talked about that weren't necessarily related to projects but are worthy of note. The desire to meet more frequently, the discussion regarding funding and how do we come up with a funding guideline that would take a look at lease versus purchase, or how we mix grant funding as well as funding out of operating, tree maintenance. I think there were a number of items that were discussed at the CIP committee that were directly related to growth and the impacts of growth, whether that's expansion of public safety facilities, public safety infrastructure, communications, that sort of thing. We also took a look at, albeit fairly brief, do we want to try to incorporate a dark sky program into future capital projects? And then I think the other point that was well made by Councilman Williamson was that, as our community continues to grow and have infrastructure needs, does that elevate the workload and elevate the status of the CIP committee? Do we take the resource that we have with that committee and really utilize it more fully? Talked about comprehensive planning as it relates to the CIP, and again, one of the other items that we talked about was, where we have expenditures over 5 years or estimates, is there a way that we can also schedule those expenditures so there are not so many peaks and valleys? Very, very, very full and good discussion, and resulted in some great direction for the city. Areas of emphasis, this is on the page 2 of the narrative, and these are the items that I guess first I would like to remind City Council as well as the CIP committee that we're very cognizant of the role, I think, from council standpoint as well as a CIP standpoint. CIP's role in this process is to identify projects, it's to program them, it's to fully discuss them, vet them, and it's up to council then to prioritize, fund, and implement those projects. And I think CIP sometimes will say, well, this is very important, and council will say, well, why didn't CIP think that was important? So it's very important that we reinforce what the roles of both groups are. At the same time, there are items that were talked about more than others, and those items that kind of floated the top in terms of discussion, or that we felt like were low-hanging fruit, we wanted to make council aware of that in the report. Those items, and this is not in a particular order, but those items that kind of floated to the top: public safety communications. That's something that we've talked about now for a couple of years, and I appreciate the work that Chief Smith and Chief Bailey has done on that. We actually have some grant funding approved for that project should we move forward with it. We want to continue to support and provide resources for expanded internet options, service, and speed. Retaining wall rehab at Sulphur Creek, that's something that the city has done in the past, but we haven't done in the last 7 or 8 years. Phase 1 of the business park, again, this is something that may not have a huge budgetary impact on the city's budget, but nonetheless it is an important capital project that garnered a lot of discussion and an area of emphasis. Water system looping projects, and as well as projects related to ongoing studies. So that's where the pre-treatment upper pressure plane studies that are currently being done, we wanted to make sure that the byproduct of those studies get the recognition and the emphasis that we think that they will need. Talked about upgrades to the hostess house, and again, we think that by means of hot resources, prior to further investigation and construction of a civic center, and I think the common comment with that was that, you know, let's take care of what we have. If we have deficiencies in an asset, let's make sure those are taken care of first, and we feel like that there may be a funding alternative for that other than operating funds. Possible addition of covered pavilion at Campbell Park, and this is another project that we felt like was made even more compelling by the interest that Vision Lampasas was also taking, so that may be a cooperative project. Without coming up with a specific list of pieces of equipment, I think the common theme on heavy equipment and apparatus was that we want to make sure that we have a plan to replace those before they become unserviceable. Right now, we will always have to spend $10,000 to $15,000 a year on a sweeper. You can't have that kind of piece of equipment with that many mechanical. But the point in time which it starts costing more than that, we need to go ahead and have a plan to replace a piece of equipment like that before it becomes unserviceable. Development of a signage plan for wayfinding city facilities and vehicles, and I think the committee comment related to that was, let's start with the plan, and then we can implement beyond that. So, and then assessment of security systems for critical infrastructure, public facilities, recreation sites. And that may be nothing more than an assessment. It doesn't necessarily mean cameras. It could be gates. It could be a different sort of controls that we have at our facilities. You know, many of these may have direct or substantial operating budget impact, but some of them may not. We may be able to, again, pick off some of the items that we can be a little more creative in our funding. The next couple of items are basically just a highlight list of the different schedules. I'm not going to go into the schedules behind this narrative, but I do want to at least hit some high points on public facilities. Some of this will be a little redundant from what I've just said, but wanted to highlight, you know, in terms of public facilities, which is a specific item that's identified in your in your charter that the CIP committee reviews, but we've, over the past year, 2 park restrooms, finished the Calvert Municipal Building, we built a wastewater shop and lab. Other items that we discussed, investment in the Hostess House and Colored School in deference to investigation and investment in the Civic Center. Committee felt upkeep of current facilities was more compelling than investment in new facilities at this time. Taking a look at some improvements, some additional improvements to the Calvert building, the exterior in terms of lighting, landscaping, accessibility, irrigation. Start looking at the possibility of a West Side Fire Department substation. And then also there you'll see in the schedule, if you dig down, that there are several upgrades for existing facilities in terms of the IT office, the police department, Hannah Springs, and electric street department shop. The CIP schedule is kind of the meat of the report. I think that's probably the was the initial vision when this was ordained by council at the time, which is, what are those capital improvement projects? Some highlights of those, again, for the next 3 or 4 major street rebuilds, paving projects: 3rd Street, Key to Western, 3rd Street, Hackberry to the Bridge, and 6th to 10th Street between Broad and Walnut over there by the middle school. Business Park, looping projects, upgrades to the headworks and pre-treatment facility, although that is still undefined at this time until we get a study back. Park facilities, practice fields at 580, taking a look at enhancements and extensions to the trail system, covered pavilion at Campbell Park, retaining wall rehab. These are items also that, as our committee talked about, really dovetail nicely with what's being talked about during the comprehensive planning process. Public safety communications are on the CIP list. The cost share with WCID 1 and the State Water Conservation Board to upgrade the identified flood control dams to high hazard. This is an item that we have talked about. As we've seen increased development below these flood control dams, they're now reclassified to high hazard. What will it take for us to upgrade those dams? And the one thing I do want to mention is that number that would be a local cost share will probably be more than we have estimated at this time, but that's not untrue with a lot of the projects that we've identified. As we get closer and as we specify them more clearly, those costs will change. Investment in planning and engineering. So the whole planning section of the CIP, we've taken a look at different projects: interceptor capacity, water modeling, parks master plan, zoning regs as a byproduct of our comprehensive plan, airport terminal plan, and then support of enhanced internet speeds. All in all, we've identified 82 projects on the CIP list, and that's just for the next 5 years. Again, some of these will be on longer than 5 years, as we all know, but we'll pick them off. Fleet forecast and major maintenance, again, that's we just wanted to call that out. Those are the items that make our systems more reliable, more efficient, and enhance our ability to serve the public. Tree trimming, pole inspections, improved metering, paving. In terms of fleet replacement, just to highlight, over the next 5 years, we're forecast to replace 8 police cars, 2 fire apparatus, 3 pickups, back truck, and a sweeper, and we probably have on the tail end of that some heavy equipment. In terms of the statement in summary, I just point out that, again, the committee approved a priority statement that prioritizes needs based on regulatory compliance, public safety and accessibility, cultural and recreational enhancements. We have segregated projects from fleet replacement and maintenance, but they are made a part of this program just because it all these types of work, all the type of work like this fits together. That is a very, very brief review of the committee statement and summary. Again, fully understand and cognizant that we're a couple of months late on this, but we took a 90-day break. I want to reemphasize that our committee, this was I think the city should be very proud of the people that are involved on this committee. They've done a very good job, great discussion, good engagement, and with that, I'd turn it over to Diana, Neil, Danelle, Chuck, anybody else that want to make comment on it.
I'd like to, for Neil and Diana, just to kind of comment a little bit of what your thoughts were as we went through this thing. Yes, it was very rapid, more so than we try to do, but the situation evolved into what it is. But I'd like to hear your all thoughts and comments about what you felt as you were coming into the program for the first time, and what you, with the wrap-up of what you all felt we accomplished by it, if you would.
Well, I was happy to see that the city has placed a lot of emphasis on maintaining the equipment that they have now, that they've got a scheduled maintenance program, and that there's an emphasis on safety. So I was glad to see that there were already some things in place. The hostess house was a big surprise to me. I knew it was an old building that was kind of run down. I was a little surprised when we got the maintenance list on what all needed to be done to that to bring it up to code. So that's why I felt really strongly about moving some of that civic center money to upgrading what we have now, because we can do that within a year and get those in compliance. I mean, really, no one should be leasing it if it's not up to code. And that if you have a couple of facilities in the colored school available for smaller venues, then you can start resaving the money for a civic center later. So I felt strongly about that, and I also feel strongly about the signage. That would be a pretty minor expense and would be kind of a one-time master plan for what could happen over the next several years. So it's not a mishmash. It's a mishmash now. So I'd like to see that. And of course, I like the dark skies idea. I think that would be not expensive to the city, but just to have a master plan on that. Nearby communities have already done it, and I'd be happy to organize some workshops and get some speakers in to tell you the value of the dark skies project.
I kind of got the impression that most of the committee was in agreement that this public safety communications item was a really high priority. It's, you know, failure to upgrade our public safety communications at best would be as inefficient, and at worst, were we to have some type of a real tragedy or crisis in this community, it could be catastrophic. So, you know, I kind of felt like there was strong emphasis on that communications project. I guess other things we talked about, security at some of our sites. I mean, that looks like something that, may not make much difference, but could make a lot of difference, and maybe a pretty low-hanging fruit item to take care of. Certainly, from my position on the Economic Development Corporation Board, whereas we're working on the business park and the city council's had information about that, I feel like most of us believe that the biggest limiting factor for economic development here is our internet speed, and feel like that's a real high priority. And we don't have a plan for that. We don't know how, I mean, we're working on it, don't have money or anything like that, but that certainly is something else that I think is a high priority.
Finally, I just want to thank you and, of course, the committee with you for coming up with this thing. This is probably the most exhaustive, detailed one that we've been able to conjure up in quite a while. Even if council will just look at the first part of it, it summarizes in very good detail of what we have accomplished, what we're doing today, and many, many things that are to be done in the future. Again, money being the issue, big ticket items. Some of these things, when you go to talking a fire truck and a back truck and all these things that we talk about in the fleet program by themselves, you're talking over $1 million easy, just adding the two together. So it's one of those things for council. There's a lot of things on here. We did not go into the business of trying to prioritize for council what was first, second, and third. We gave you a snapshot of what all is still relevant, more so relevant probably to 1 through 5 years coming out. Monies are not as available as they used to be, where we used to be able to look at maybe 5 or 6 major projects in a year. My thought process is for me only that you may be down to 2. You take 3rd Street that everybody seems to want fixed, but it is a multi-million-dollar project to begin with. Monies and availability of such is one of those things. But again, Finley, thank you for putting this thing together.
I appreciate the way the city council works with us, and as long as we work together, well, maybe we can keep things going. Thank you.
Does staff have any comment on the process? Chief Bailey, Chief Smith sat in on these meetings. Assistant City Manager Roy, Yvonne?
I haven't looked into exactly where. Since I've arrived here a year ago, it's been talked about that it would be somewhere close to the 580 Sports Complex. That makes some sense. There's some other discussion around that people would say, no, that's way too off the beaten path to go anywhere. I think you'd have to do some type of a good investigation into it to determine what would be the best place to locate it. As far as the funding goes for that, I'll say we'll have to look and discuss those types of things. I've just done an assessment as far as the needs and an increase in call volume, increase in manpower on the scene of any large-scale incident that we have. So, all the rooftops that we're adding in the last year and a half to the next 3, 4, 5 years. I mean, even if we go at a lower rate than we've gone the last couple of years, we're still talking another close to 1,000 homes. Yeah. I think the big things in determining that will also be how we respond from COVID. That wasn't part of the initial assessment of the need for a different fire station, but I think as far as when you see how we respond as a community, not just within our community, but if you look also at larger cities, and I think you're gonna see some eventual urban sprawl from that. I think you're gonna see a lot of businesses that are not gonna require that you be at work 5 days a week. And I think that goes back to, if we can increase internet speed here, you're going to have a lot of viable people in this community that can work remotely, and whether it be in Austin or whether it be in Waco or whether it be in Dallas or California or anything like that. So I think that now is really a good opportunity to build on that. But of course, when you put those people in homes, you're also going to increase the demand for water, electricity, sewer, public safety, and all those things. So, but yeah, I think it definitely needs to be in the next 5 years, and that was a project that I'd spoken to the city manager about. Within the first 6 months that I was here, I'd kind of given him a timeline as far as what I saw for the fire department, what our needs and strengths, weaknesses, assets, and threats and stuff like that were.
Finley, if I may, I think, and I wanted to thank the committee, first of all. I think this is a very comprehensive report that you've given us. I also would like to, I'm hoping that our programs that we're putting together, as well as the comprehensive plan, the thoroughfare plan may end up driving where we end up going with a substation and those types of things as well. So I would hope in the long term that we could kind of build all this together into a plan, and those should be able to help prioritize these items. I think we've been given a very extensive list that'll probably last more than any of our lifetimes in here, but they're all needed projects, and I really appreciate y'all's input in it.
You could vote us some money, Dr. Lovell, that'd be great. If there are no other comments, I think we'll take a short 5-minute break to reassemble the room and wipe it down, and then we will reconvene in about 5 minutes. Okay, we're back to continue the workshop. The next item is FY 2021 budget. Finley?
Wanted to take some time to provide you an update, seek your input on a number of items related to the FY21 budget. I would say we're not as far along as we'd like to be, but we certainly feel very good about the position that the city is in and the opportunities that will present themselves to council through this agenda item. We always try to target, the last meeting, June, first meeting of July, to bring you the projections for the coming budget. However, we're not in a position to provide those to you tonight. We're close, but we've just not had enough time to vet those initial projections. What we would like to do is talk a little bit about where we are and where we're going. It's been an unusual year, to say the least. We've certainly seen that with previous agenda items in terms of delaying meetings with the CIP. We've been distracted by the current state of affairs. So we've had a few obstacles to deal with. We're not making excuses. But at the same time, we want to be very diligent and seek your input about putting these numbers together. We are very pleased with the position that we are moving forward, and we think council has the opportunity to take a look at particularly the performance of the city over the last several years based on the decisions you've made as a good setup to identify some priorities and some funding mechanisms for our FY21 budget. Better? Oh, sorry. I didn't realize the mic was off, so. Again, the city's overall financial health continues to be good, and that's a credit to the council and the leadership of our elected officials. The one thing I would also mention is that our estimates and our year-end projections, I would still consider very conservative. I think that it's very likely that we will do better than what we've got down here on paper. Specifically, this afternoon, we want to review our current projection and the status. We also want to take a look at some individual funds and some differences within those funds to see where the positive performance has been. I think the timing is very, very good. We've just got done listening to the CIP, and I think every year we want to do this kind of in this format, take a look at CIP and then go directly into a discussion on budget because the two are so related. So I think that I think this does highlight how effectively the CIP process can work in relationship to the budget. We want to talk a little bit about use of fund balance and what council's appetite is for that. take a look at the capital priorities. We need your input on that. What floated to the top on the CIP committee may not be on the top of your list, and we certainly need to know that as we build our budget. We want to take a look at some trends and assumptions in terms of taxes, insurance, things like that. And then I think the other thing that we desperately need your input on is, what else would you like to see? What else can we provide to you? Over the years, we've had workshops specifically related to utilities or to fees or to staffing. So we'd certainly be interested and look forward to your input on that later in this agenda item. In review, in terms of our year-end projections, at this point, we're estimating, staff is estimating that we'll probably, in our total operating funds, surplus a little over $1 million. Again, we think that these are solid numbers and they perhaps could be better. And Yvonne's shaking her head, so she's not kicking me. But we think that there are some very positive things that have happened in a very crazy year. But our general fund continues to do well. We're not requiring as much of a transfer from utilities to our general fund as we've budgeted for or as we've done in the past. So the better the general fund does, the better our utility funds do because we minimize some of the transfers back and forth. Water, wastewater performs well. Electric continues to perform well. Airport, a little better than planned. The other operating funds that we'll look at basically will zero out, so I don't reference them here. We, through this previous budget, also, or our current budget, also had looked at a budget transfer from electric to Fund 22, which is our Economic Development Fund. And that is a mechanism that was set up basically through the comments of Councilman Clark in terms of having money set aside when we take a look at infrastructure development for an economic development project or a project that would create a certain amount of commerce. We haven't had to make that transfer yet this year. And so those funds, we're not pulling out of fund balance or allocating those. In fact, the general rule is that we will not transfer unless it's necessary, even though it's budgeted. The other thing that we want to talk a little bit about is the previous year's performance, because we've done well for a number of years, and we think that provides council with some options as we plan for next year. You've got these spreadsheets behind your packet, so if you don't like to squint, council, you do have the full-page exhibits behind your council, and they're in the order that I'm going to refer to them. If we talk about our overall operating funds, and these are the funds that identify the little over $1 million surplus for projected year end. If you go to the very bottom of the next to the last column, the net surplus or deficit in parentheses, see about $1 million. If you skip a couple of places over, our FY19 actual surplus about $610,000. There are some disclaimers within this. The FY18 actual shows a surplus of about $1.9 million, and again, there are some disclaimers with that number that I'll need to go into detail on. But it is safe to say that you're in a position now that you, at least from staff's perspective, you could utilize some of this fund balance, as you heard about from your recent audit report, as well as our projected year end, to fund some of those items that you felt were compelling. So let's just break these down a little bit more. Take a look at the general fund. This is all departments within the general fund. This is your admin, your public safety, your streets, your parks, your trash, your library, your finance department, utility billing collection. All of those, is about a $10 million budget for the city year in, year out. If you look at the FY18 actual, and again, just go down to the very bottom number in that column, FY18, 348,000 surplus, FY19, 100,000. Projected year end is 175,000. A couple of things that council made the very conscious and I think very smart decision to do is approve a balance transfer, or a fund transfer in FY18 and FY19 to build up the general fund balance. So we took the additional money, a little bit of the additional money that was made in other departments, and we said, let's continue to prop up the general fund balance by $100,000 in FY19, and I believe it was $200,000 in FY18, Yvonne, does that sound right? So through those decisions, we've continued to create that climate of a very healthy financial position. The projected year end is $175,000 in general, and a lot of that is, is going to be related to fund transfer, or not necessarily. We see a little uptick in terms of tax revenue, but all in all, it's some savings in salaries and benefits. Some of that is, by vacancies that we've held on to. So I think some positive signs in terms of our general fund. In terms of water, wastewater, I want to talk a little bit about the FY18 actual. We've got about a $1.2 million surplus there, but I'd want to point out that under transfers, we transferred quite a bit of money in FY18 and FY19 into water, wastewater from Fund 68. Fund 68 is the 2016 certificates of obligation. So we transfer that money into water, wastewater to fund those capital projects. Once the capital projects are completed, that becomes an asset, and then you're not paying for the cost of the capital project, you're paying depreciation. The amount of depreciation we pay is kind of a wash versus the amount of capital expenditure we had for that year. So if you look further down in FY 2018, about a $924,000 expenditure for depreciation under the contingency line, and about $912,000 in 2019. The point I'm making is, even though we've transferred funds in, we've conducted capital projects, we still are paying for them through depreciation. It still is a net positive for the performance of that particular fund. You see projected year end for this year, about $358,000. Our sales are up a little bit. Our supplies and transfers are down. Again, if we don't need to make the transfer, we won't make it. So I think positive there. Electric department, and I think council is well aware of the overall magnitude of this department compared to others in terms of the city. It's the electric department budget is larger than the general budget. Again, we continue to see a very good performance in the electric department. A $528,000 positive variance this year to plan. Our sales were down a little bit, but salaries and benefits were down, supplies were down, contract services were down. We didn't have to, if we don't sell as much, we don't have to buy as much on the wholesale side. So very positive results on the electric department, and the projected year end for the electric is the lion's share of the over $1 million surplus we're projecting for FY 20. So just total, again, this is everything I've been saying. Our revenue is slightly down from plan, but we also have more than made up with that on the expenditure side. So we're sitting, like I said, at about a little over $1 million projected year end. Less than 5% of our overall budget. It's a big number, but in terms of the overall percentage of our total budget, it is it's pretty acceptable. I mean, we hit it on target. I think the other thing that we would reinforce to council is that our performance in 18 and 19 suggests that you are in a position that you could use fund balance, and certainly even if we broke even all those months based on our auditor's report at the previous or audit at the previous meeting that we discussed, we certainly feel you are in a good position. There are a lot of unknowns out there, though, and we want to make sure that, if we get hit with a pretreatment or an upper pressure plane project, we still want to maintain a healthy balance so that those particular projects, even though they're unspecified, can be addressed at that time. Just a quick look at non-operating funds. So these are other funds that are referenced from time to time. Fund 63 and Fund 64, those are the funds that have kind of been sticking around for years and years. They represent the Key Avenue Fund that was a 2011 issuance, as well as I think the 63 was the 2006 issue. So we had those funds that remained, that we had a balance for, and council made the decision, I think it was a good decision, to go ahead and utilize that in the water wastewater shop and lab. So those monies are, those funds are basically going to be drained. Fund 68 is a 2016 CO, and particularly for infrastructure, parks projects, those projects that are identified within the conditions of that issuance, you would have $580,000 to use for those types of projects. And then hotel occupancy tax fund, again, subject to the restrictions of the Texas tax code. Those would be available for projects. For example, I think the Hostess House would be an appropriate use of those funds. The Historic Colored School would be another thing you would look at, in addition to other items that would meet the goals and the conditions of the tax code. Talking a little bit about use of fund balance, capital priorities. Again, you've just heard the CIP report, and in general, we've got other planning and engineering projects that will result in identified projects. In terms of available, excess balance as well as other funding sources, HOT or CO money. We'll talk a little bit about accelerated purchases, which was something that we have taken advantage of just about every year that I've been here. And then we also just want to validate that if you do discuss use of fund balance, basically if all you did was use the fund balance from what we have this year, you would still be well within your policy in terms of use of those funds. I'm skipping around a little bit, but I want to talk just briefly about budget trends and assumptions. We've seen our valuations, actually, the taxable valuations have gone down a little bit, and we'll talk about this a little bit more into my report, but the amount of protests far exceeds what the protests were last year, so that should even itself out. Sales tax we're very concerned about, but as soon as we think that we're due for a hit, we jump up 20% or something crazy like that. So I think it'll catch up to us, but certainly we've bucked the trend or bucked what our expectations were. Health insurance, I'm pleased to report that the city will receive about a 5.29% decrease in our health insurance. It's the same coverage, same plans. But I think our employees have done a good job of utilizing their insurance, staying healthy. That'll result in about a $70,000 savings to the city. We're going to see a slight decrease in our workman's comp insurance. Again, not as big a number, but nonetheless, it is a savings. And I think we will also see the need for transfers may be decreased slightly based on our financial performance. So I think I don't want to sound like I'm overly optimistic, but I think there's some good signs in terms of what we're seeing, and despite the current state of affairs and the current crisis that we're all dealing with. So more specifically, I think what I'll stop with is we're interested in your input in terms of what your appetite is for the use of fund balance. And in particular, and again, this is just a starting point. There may be other items on your list, other items you'd want to further discuss or vet. But use of fund balance, perhaps for public safety communications, an unspecified pre-treatment project, minor facility upgrades, maybe a signage plan, remainder for future projects. There may be some council, and again, I'm anxious to hear what your input is, that may say, you know what, we need to strike while the iron's hot and take advantage of the fact of our healthy financial condition and maybe step out for some additional projects. But again, this is just a starting point, and certainly your list may be different than our list. Use of hot funds. One of the things that we thought about was, you know, the MEP and code survey for the hostess house, which would identify those specific deficiencies from a mechanical, electrical, and plumbing engineering standpoint, as well as take another bite out of the historic colored school. We took a bite out of it 2 or 3 years ago and did some HVAC work and did some other work to the building, but are we prepared maybe with hot funds to take another bite out of that program? Certainly, I think, you know, going ahead and utilizing our position for patrol vehicle and a pickup, those are the 2 fleet items that are scheduled for FY21. The other thing that I'm interested in your input on are the additional budget topics that you'd like to discuss. What sort of, you know, if we want to carve those topics out for a specific workshop date, rates and fees, if there are any discussion related to that, other projects that maybe have not been identified. I think we need to talk about compensation. We also have typically, some point in July, early August, had agencies come in that we have provided funding for. That's been WCID one with the flood control dams. It's been LCHEC. It's been those other agencies have come in and discussed the work that their organizations have done. And then on July 27th, you'll also be asked to identify a proposed tax rate, not your final tax rate, but a proposed tax rate that you would not exceed, but you certainly could come down from as well. I fully understand that it would have been better to bring you something that was buttoned up a little more than this, but I think the timing is good, particularly having just heard the CIP report. I'm pleased that the city is in the financial position as it is, and it provides a council some opportunity. But I'll leave it on this last screen and look forward to your comments and your input.
Finley, I have a question, or I guess a comment. I think that it would be good for us to use the hot funds to bring that hostess house up to code. And since we have them, I think we should go ahead and do that. It was on the CIP. We have the funds in the fund balance through the hot funds. I think this would be a good opportunity to do that. I was also curious about, I think the public safety thing that was also on the CIP is a really good place. But how are we on the internet? Because we kind of started something with the fiber and looking into the fiber ring and looking into the different things, but we haven't really made any progress on that. And we really, I mean, that's something that I think needs to be a priority. I know it's too much money for what we have here, but I think that's something that definitely needs to be looked at because we aren't going to be able to grow if we don't have internet. And I think the lack of reliable internet in town is really hurting us.
Agreed.
Then one other little question. You know how we were doing the second round of bugs and the wastewater thing to kind of get the...
Yes.
How did that go?
I'd defer to Van on that. The last update that I received was prior to me going out of town, but there's some progress made, but I don't know. Van, do you want to speak to that? We're looking good. So what Van suggests is that, you know, there is some positive improvement in terms of the performance of that aeration basin.
So have they started like letting companies come in again to test it, or?
Our plan is to do a test dump toward the end of this month and see what that does, see if it has any bad effects. If it doesn't, then we're gonna open up, just to Lampasas and Vernon County, and we're gonna have a gallon minimum, or a maximum gallon.
So just for the benefit of those folks listening in or tuning in that couldn't hear that, what Van is saying is that we'll do a test, start doing a limited testing of it with local haulers by the end of this month.
Thank y'all.
I would like to bring up three things that are on my mind. One is the regulatory side regarding water and wastewater and any of that in regards to the planning, the engineering that we have outstanding to tell us where to go. I've expressed my concerns about the wastewater plant and the pretreatment and the dumping on us and those types of things. And I think we have to prioritize that up towards the top. The other is, I think we kind of made a commitment regarding the Economic Development Corporation to attempt to try to do something with the industrial park as well. I also think that the hot funds would be a good use for the hostess house as well. But I'm really concerned about our regulatory issues as we come down this line and our ability to transport wastewater back down to the plant in regards to all our building being on the north and west side and south side, and we still got to get it to the east side. And so we need to do a lot more planning in that. And I think the public safety communications are in the process. A lot of it, in my discussion with the chief back there a while ago, in regards to we're looking at some grant possibilities, and it may work itself out. We may have to do some match and those types of things, but those things have been on the agenda for quite a while. The other thing in my budget last year, first time going through it with this council, I would really like to see us address the compensation issue up front. I don't know any other way to say it, but to me it sends the wrong message to the staff if we wait till the end. So I would like to see us address that at an earlier time.
Thank you for the comments.
Anyone else? I would just like to say on one of our workshop dates, I would like to schedule a tour of the wastewater plant. And I would also like to know a dollar figure on those agency requests before we have them come in, if we do have them come in. Anyone else have any comments on the budget? Michael?
It looks good. I think we ought to hold on to, I mean, I don't want to set anything in stone and try to count our chickens before we hatch, because we just don't know what's going to happen in the upcoming months, you know. It doesn't hurt us to hold on to as much of this without pre-spending it for sure. I know this money could go in a bunch of different directions and a bunch of useful directions that are all needed equally. But I kind of like the idea of just sitting on $1 million in the back pocket for a little bit.
Yeah, and absolutely. This is the very beginning of the process. And I guarantee you what we talk about tonight could be much different than what we take a look at the first meeting in September when you're going to be asked to approve the budget. But I appreciate your comments.
I want to thank you, Finley, for all your work and all staff's work on the budget so far. Thanks. If there are no more comments, we'll go to the discussion and updates regarding COVID-19. Chief Smith.
Good evening, Council. Since the last time that we've met, we're going to discuss a little bit more on the COVID-19 that's going on.
Throughout the state of Texas, we're now at 264,313 total cases. Now, this is total cases that we're looking at. This goes back to March. This is the cumulative of that. During that time, we've had 3,235 deaths that have been attributed to the coronavirus. Looking at active cases, we're at 124,659. Of those active cases, 10,405 are hospitalized today. That means we have 8.3% of those who contract the coronavirus that end up requiring hospitalization. The amount of new cases in 1 week is staggering. When you look at how many just active cases we added, 63,000 in 1 week. 63,000 in 1 week. The last time we met, we spoke about a positivity rate. That's the number of tests that come back positive given the ratio of done. We were concerned, and we talked about the fact that the governor watches that along with the hospital beds. Once it gets up around 10%, that's when they start getting a little bit nervous, and that's when they start making some decisions, and I think we saw that. I think we went to 13% at one point. This past week, we've gone up, and today we sit at 16.85%. So even if we have several days in a row of very low testing, it's going to take quite a bit to get that number down back below 10, and then we need to see it continue to be below 10. So that's a real number to watch right there. The hospitalizations and the positivity rate. Looking at the county of Lampasas, we have a total of 72 cases in Lampasas County now. 33 are active at this time. 2 of these cases actually requiring hospitalization. We have a little bit of demographics on this. We have 1 actually under the age of 10. We have 6 between the age of 10 and 19, 6 between the age of 20 and 29, 1 between the age of 30 to 39, 6 from 40 to 49, 3 in their 50s, 5 in their 60s, 5 in their 70s, and 1 over the age of 80. We also discussed the last time that I was here that the growing population, the demographics that were making a steep increase in this was the age bracket from 20 to 29 and 30 to 39. They have overtaken now. That age group is now the leading demographics, where throughout the majority of this COVID-19 sequestering and everything, we had held at 40 to 60-year-olds were the ones that were contracting this, and they were the lead candidates as far as patients. They've overtaken that since the beginning now. They're the highest demographic set in that. Do y'all have any questions about COVID that you'd like to ask?
The 2 hospitalizations are not in our hospital because our hospital can't take someone, is that correct?
Actually, our hospital can take it depending on what the case is.
We're just not set up for the ICU, right?
I think if it came down to it, we could set up with the ICU, but I believe that right now I'd have to go back and speak with Brandy. I know that they can take an ICU case, but if they have the ability to transfer them out to a different hospital, that is what they would rather do. I think that there is a COVID case in the hospital once upon a time, like a week ago. It did not require ICU or anything like that. I think that they were able to treat that patient, and then that patient is actually discharged from the hospital, and it's actually no longer an active case.
Thank you.
Chief, I've noticed lots of people complaining that we're not getting enough information when these reports are released. And I know we don't need names and addresses and such, but this date, the ages that you just gave, will that be coming along next time as well?
I would love for that to be coming along. You have to understand that probably these numbers that I'm giving you, I got from the public health official with the County of Lampasas. And if you check the website now for the Texas Department of Public Safety, not the Public Safety, but State Health Human Services, they're nowhere close to these numbers. They don't even show us with that many. So we're way ahead of that. As long as Dr. Hay continues to share that information with us, if she can make it available, I'll be glad to share it with you.
And is there anything you need from the council as far as these emergency orders go, or? We're
If
just
you believe in
waiting to
prayer,
hear?
start praying.
Okay. Any
It'd be nice to-
questions?
What's our current active, you said?
Our current active in the state or in Lampasas?
Lampasas.
33. 33 is the active number in Lampasas. Lampasas County, yes. I'm sorry. I don't have the demographics as far as what's in town.
That's fine.
Yeah, but that's Lampasas County.
Thank you, Chief.
You bet.
We should take a 10-minute break here and come back for the regular session, if that's all right. Need a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. We'll return. Okay, let's call to order the regular session of the council meeting. Chief Bailey, would you please lead us in prayer?
Please join me in prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the beautiful day that we've had today. We know that we have to have the days of challenges and days like today that were extremely warm so that we can appreciate the things that we do have and appreciate the times when we have cooler days. Lord, we ask that you heal those that are ill and that you end this virus so that no one else becomes ill. Lord, please heal the hearts that are hurting as well. Lord, we ask that you join us during our meeting today and guide us, and that you see that we all make it home safely at the end of this evening. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Chuck. Next item is presentations and proclamations, and we do have a swearing in of Jeremy Herring.
Good evening, council. Happy to introduce our newest officer, Jeremy Herring. Officer Herring, will you come up here? Officer Herring started with us back in June. It's a rare find for us to get someone with Jeremy's experience. He has 13 years policing our community, comes over from the Sheriff's Department. We're really happy to have him. With Jeremy tonight's his wife, Jenica. They both live here in Lampasas, and we're happy to have him. Just want to introduce him to y'all.
Welcome.
Walk this way. Right over there, I think, and spouse. Raise your right hand, please. I, Jeremy Herring,
I, Jeremy Herring,
hereby solemnly swear
do hereby solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute the duties
of the office of Lampasas, Texas Police Officer,
and will, to the best of my ability,
preserve, protect, and defend
preserve, protect, and defend
the Constitution and laws of the United States
and of this state,
so help me God.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I've done this once or twice. Can you tell? There you go.
There you go. Thank you. Thank you so much. I would like to tell you the number again if you have any questions or concerns to call in for the meeting. The number is 512-556-0332. Again, 556-0332. Next up is citizen comments. Any citizen who desires to address the city council on a matter that is not included on the agenda may do so at this time. The city council may not deliberate on items presented under this agenda item. Is there anyone who wishes to make a statement? Any calls? Next item is citizen comment for an item that is included on the agenda, may do so at this time. Next item is a public hearing to receive citizen comments regarding a request to rezone property from single-family residential SF20 to single-family SF8.
Good evening, Pro Mayor and Council. We have public hearing for a property owner, the Cummings. They could not be here this evening, but I'll act on their behalf. We are just interested in getting anybody's comments regarding 1 acre of land over on Willis that is their property, that they are looking to rezone from single-family 20 to single-family 8. I did send out notifications to 8 property owners within a 200-foot radius. I did receive 1 letter in favor of the request and none in protest. This item was heard before Planning and Zoning on July 2nd, and at that time, the Planning and Zoning Commission does recommend approval of this request.
I did just have one question about that. They're going to rezone and have 2 homes on the property?
Yes, ma'am. They actually want to rezone the property now, and then they're going to have it replatted into 2 lots, and then they will build a smaller home in the area that's not already taken by their home.
After the replat?
Yes, at a later time.
Okay. Do we want to close this public hearing? Public comments?
I was curious because I only saw the 1 letter approving, because didn't you just say you got 2, 1 for and 1 against?
No, ma'am. There was 8 sent. I got 1 letter returned, which is in favor of the request, and none protesting it.
Okay, I'm sorry, I misheard.
Okay, do I want to close this public hearing? Someone make a motion? Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Second is a public hearing to receive citizen comments regarding approval, denial, or approval with modifications for a request for specific use permit to allow for permanent makeup tattooing in an area zone commercial C. The property is described as 1.89 acres, ABST 0419 LHW Johnson Survey, commonly known as 301 South Highway 281, Suite D, which is the Lotus Beauty Spa and Salon in Lampasas.
Yes, this evening, Sandy Irvin is the property owner, and then Marla Wimp-Muir, she is the applicant that is asking for this specific use permit. She is looking to do the permanent makeup tattooing at this location. She's basically renting space, and at this time, we're just looking for public comment for any concerns or issues they may have with this request.
And I noticed that the one concern you had that came in was making sure it was just for tattooing of makeup.
Yes, ma'am. We did send out notifications to property owners, and we did receive 2 in return. They were both in favor of the request. However, they wanted to make sure that it was specific for the cosmetic makeup tattooing and no other type of tattooing. Currently in our zoning regulations, the way that it is actually defined is a tattoo parlor or piercing, but we wanted to make sure that everybody understood that the tattooing piece is the actual, the same concept. It's just different how the level that it goes into your skin, basically, the depth of it. So when we did the actual ordinance and we're doing the actual public hearing and the request for the specific use permit, we are very specific in stating that it was for just specifically for cosmetic makeup tattooing and no other type of tattooing. And it's just a space inside the Lotus Beauty Salon.
Right.
And my understanding on specific use is that it's for the business, current business only.
I think the concern was this person must have a license to do tattoos anyway, to do the makeup, and they were concerned that it would turn into something different, I think.
Right, no, no, ma'am. It's through the TDLR where her licensing comes from for the cosmetic tattooing. And with regards to that, they do have to have a letter backing it up saying that that property is zoned properly for the cosmetic makeup tattooing, which is where we are today, getting her the approval that she needs.
Even though that it says it's for tattooing and piercing.
They're all the same. It's still a tattoo. It's just a different depth in which you're going to your skin.
So the only way that they would do that would be the makeup. They wouldn't be allowed to do piercings or other tattoos.
No, ma'am. This is just for cosmetic tattooing. That's it.
And as Randy said, it would be issued to the business if anything else, if that business is gone, the SUP is gone as well.
No, it's to the actual property itself is the specific use permit. However, if another business goes in there and changes of use, then it may not be applicable to what they're doing.
Right.
But it's the property itself. And she's renting a space inside this beauty salon to do this type of makeup, cosmetic, tattooing. And that's what's specific to the specific use permit is for that one piece that we're trying to obtain from
So
her.
the same restrictions would apply to whoever else came in
Absolutely,
behind.
absolutely. It would definitely be revisited if a change of use took place.
Okay.
It's not the same tattooing, and it's not like me being covered in tattoos as opposed to my wife has her eyeliner tattooed. You know,
Correct.
it's a totally different thing, and
It's not as
she has
deep.
something. It's not even close to the same thing of
It's just in our
a
zoning.
tattoo parlor. It really it shouldn't even be classified the same thing.
And I understand.
It's
There
not
was just
anything close
The
to
way that
it.
the definitions were for the tattooing, that's why I highlighted those items in there to show, and then also provided y'all with the definition of what the actual makeup tattooing is, so you would understand it's labeled the same, but it's not nearly as deep.
Yeah, it's not artwork or anything like that. You know, it's lips and eyeliner and
Correct.
whatever else.
And Ms. Neer is here. If you have any specific questions for her, she's here as well.
Oh, that's great. We had a company, I mean, my wife got hers done a while back here in town. I guess they didn't have a SUP, or maybe they did, I don't know.
I can't speak to that. I'm not sure. I don't know
didn't
the
even know-
location.
I didn't even, well, it was over there by Walmart, when there used to be a beauty
Oh.
salon in there.
I think that came before here many years ago. I'm not sure the outcome, but that was several years ago.
Any other comments? Close the public hearing. Do I get a motion for that?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you.
Thanks, Becky. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Next item is discussion and possible action concerning approval of the minutes of the regular meeting on June 22nd. Did we have any corrections or items that need to be addressed?
I didn't notice any. I recommend they be approved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. We have a consent agenda. We're going to use items 1 and 2, and we're going to separate item 3. So 3.1, discussion and possible action regarding purchases and charges in excess of $4,000 from June 1 to June 30, 2020. 3.2, discussion and possible action regarding the second reading of an ordinance of the City of Lampasas, Lampasas County, amending Chapter 78, Traffic and Vehicles, Article 3, Stopping, Standing, and Parking, and amending Section 78-214, and adding Article 5, prohibiting commercial vehicle parking in residential areas, providing prohibitions, restrictions, temporary exceptions by permit for commercial vehicles to park on residential streets, providing for repeal of ordinances that conflict, providing savings, severability clause, effective date, and penalty not to exceed $500 for each offense, declaring an emergency and providing for related matters. Have a motion to approve the... To remove the, okay. So I will read 3.3, and then I'll need a motion to remove it. Discussion and possible action regarding the first reading. It says second. It should be first reading of an ordinance amending Appendix A, fee schedule of the Code of Ordinancing, setting a fee for Chapter 78, Traffic and Vehicle, Section 78-214 through 78, 2018-214-012 and containing a severability clause and an effective date,
I'd move to remove item 3.3.
and approve the other two.
I'll second that, removing 3.3 and approving the first two.
I've got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, unanimous. And then do we want to vote again on
Aye.
3.3? You're approving that? Need a second?
I move to approve 3.3. As
Yes,
a
as
first
a
reading.
First reading, okay. I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Don't think we have any board and department reports. Routine matters, we have a city manager operational report.
Mayor and council, I'll be brief, just a few quick items. Just wanted to let you know that we are at least taking a quick look at East 3rd Street drainage. Of course, we have a project that has been engineered from Key to Western, but we have had comments regarding drainage, standing water, et cetera, along East 3rd Street. We have observed during a recent rain event, there is some impact south of 3rd Street, but we do notice that a lot of the water stays within the gutter and actually is diverted to 4th Street to a certain extent, with the exception of the block between Western and Live Oak. We're continuing to take a look at that, shooting some elevations and monitoring and investigating, and we are also talking with our engineer about any possible solutions. CPAC, just as we were about to get rolling again, we had the spike, gained about, 6 to 10 cases within the period of a day or two, so we canceled that meeting. We do want to, we are nearing the end of the conclusion of that project, and we would like to finish it up. And I'm interested in your input. My thought was maybe we have a series of small group meetings of 3 to 4 people at a time and try to muddle through that way. But we are now at the point of the recommendation and implementation phase, and wanting to move that project forward. And again, any input you might have. The real value of the comprehensive plan is it's a community document that's based on input from the community, and when you lose that engagement and that synthesis of ideas from group discussion, you miss out, potentially you miss out on some ideas that you would want to incorporate in your plan. Sales tax, as we referenced, we're up about 26.6%. Not only is it a huge increase from this time last year, but I asked Yvonne, I said, I don't remember a month that's been that high, and I think February of 2020, we had 1 month with that type of receipts in the recent past. So we certainly have some ideas about what's driving that results, but we certainly also understand many of our small businesses are still really challenged by the restrictions and by the reopening. And so this is positive, but we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that there are a lot of businesses that are really struggling during this time. Certified roll, we received the certified roll from the LCAD. Currently, our certified roll is $436 million of taxable value. That's compared to last year's of $439. So why did the taxable valuation drop? The only thing I can point to is that we have many more dollars worth of valuation under protest this year than we did in the previous year. Business support, just to kind of wrap up the Getting Back to Business utility program that helped about 40 businesses, total cost of a little over $40,000. We originally, when we were brainstorming this and presenting it to council, we thought the impact could be much greater than that, and we certainly would have been happy to do that, that level of support, but we did not get the number of applicants that we had anticipated, nor were the bills quite as high as what we thought. Staff is also seeking council input on the replacement and usefulness of the iPads for council meetings and agenda information. We know that many of you have kind of gone back to the paper. If you're like me, I draw all over my council packets on paper. It's a little harder for me to, in my brain, to maneuver an iPad versus paper, but that's maybe has something to do with my age as well. But we're prior to making the investment, we'd be interested in your comments, kind of, I think as Monica put it, would like to kind of get a sense of what you're thinking in terms of that investment, and should we go ahead and move forward that in the next budget year. And if there are other questions that remain for council, how will this integrate perhaps into the new software, agenda software that staff is trying to implement, or what other options that we might have. We'd be happy to provide additional information or research on that. But certainly if council has a moment or a thought on that investment and that technology, we'd be happy to hear it. And I know Monica's anxious to hear it as well.
My personal thought on the iPads, I think that they were a really good idea, but they're such a big investment. And when we get the emails, we can download the stuff and look at it ourselves, and then we have the handwritten packets. I personally, because they were so slow and they were old, I gave mine back a long time ago, and I've been happier without it. But that's just me personally, and that's because digitally we can download them and we can look at all the stuff without needing that iPad on whatever device that we choose to download it on. But that, like I said, that's just me.
I also have been using a tablet. I've turned mine back in, but I don't know how the rest of you feel.
I'm
about
old
it.
school and I probably won't use it.
I use mine, so I like it. I like having one. I don't have a computer at home, like a desktop. So Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, I can read through my packet, so I don't have to do it at work when I'm extremely busy. So for me, I like having one, but I'm not going to be here next year, so doesn't matter.
Chuck, do you have a preference?
I'm okay without it.
Well, we'll talk to the other two and get a consensus, maybe. Anyone else have any thoughts on that? Under Mayor's comments, I would just like to wish Mayor and her family a speedy recovery. I don't think we have any unfinished business, new business. We have discussion and possible action regarding selection of a website photo contest winner.
Mayor Pro Tem and City Council, there were 5 entries for the month of June.
I recommend that we approve entry number 4.
Number 4?
I like number 5. But it doesn't matter.
Anyone want to make a motion for one or the?
That's 4. And someone said 5, right?
I just like it because the water's so clear and it shows the really neat, I just think it's neat. I like the other one too, but I like that one better.
I'll withdraw mine.
So we have a motion for number 4?
Number 4.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you. 7.2, discussion and possible action regarding the first reading of an ordinance to consider approval, denial, or approval with modification, request to rezone a property from single-family residential 20, SF20, to single-family residential 8, SF8. The property is described as 1 acre, the L.H. Johnson survey, commonly known as 1205 South Willis Street, Lampasas.
This item was discussed in public hearing. We're asking now if you consider a motion to approve the first reading of an ordinance to rezone the property from single-family 20 to single-family 8.
Do I have a motion to approve that?
So moved.
Second.
Second. Do we need any discussion? Does anyone have any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. 7.3, discussion and possible action regarding the first reading of an ordinance to consider approval, denial, or approval with modification to a request for a specific use permit, SUP, to allow for permanent makeup tattooing in an area zoned Commercial C. Property is described as 301 South Highway 281, Suite D, Lotus Beauty Spa and Salon, Lampasas.
This item was discussed in public hearing. We're asking that you consider a motion to approve the first reading for a specific use permit to allow for the cosmetic makeup tattooing to be allowed at this property.
So moved.
Motion and a second.
Second.
Are there any comments, questions?
Good luck.
All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you, Becky. Discussion and possible action regarding Scott and White insurance rates for the fiscal year 2020, 2021.
Yvonne? Finley?
Mayor and council is referenced in the, Mayor Pro Tem and council, as referenced in the discussion on the budget. We're asking for your approval for the renewal of the Scott and White insurance rates. It represents a 5.29% decrease, about a $70,000 savings. There's no change in coverage.
So moved.
Got a motion
Second.
and a second. Are there any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. 7.5, discussion and possible action regarding the use of joint use facility fund for an actuator at the 190 meter valve.
Good evening, council. About a year ago, staff from Kempton Water and staff from the Lampasas Water Department got together and we talked about a couple of ways to help both entities. And this is one of them. If we put this actuator on the valve, Kempner will be able to control the flow of water into Lampasas a little bit better. Right now, the majority of the water comes down the 190 side, which ages the water on the 580 side. So we can shut this water off, shut this valve, force the water from the 580 side to come through, and it just helped us out a lot. So when we decided to do this, we ran it through engineering, and they agreed that this is going to be a great deal for us. One caveat to this is the SCADA programming will come later, and they haven't quite got the exact amount for it. So we're asking you to approve this not to exceed $12,500.
And does that include the SCADA that you
That
think?
will include, yes.
Okay.
That will cover everything.
Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve not to exceed 12,000, how much?
12,500.
12,500.
Second.
Second. Any discussion, any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
That's unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you, Van. 7.6, discussion and possible action regarding specific local emergency orders related to COVID-19 pandemic.
Mayor Pro Tem and council staff is not recommending any additional orders other than the governor's executive order restrictions. Is that correct, Chief Smith?
So do we need a motion of any sort? No, ma'am. Okay. Going forward, we have 7.7, discussion and possible action regarding approval to declare multiple overstock and obsolete items in the water and wastewater inventory as surplus and allow staff to dispose of as state law allows. Van?
Good evening again. I supplied some pictures of what I'm actually trying to get rid of. Just a lot of old, broken, unusable parts. I'm just trying to put them on gov deals, try to sell them. If they won't sell, we'll scrap them and use them as scrap iron.
Could I get a motion for this?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous?
Thank you.
7.8, discussion and possible action regarding the award of a quote to AirMac for the purchase of a 60-horsepower Gardner Denver blower unit for the Ajinomoto pretreatment plant not to exceed $1,153. I'm sorry, $10,153.
Yes, ma'am. We did this in November. Of course, we have two blower units that run the pretreatment plant. And we replaced one in November, and plant manager and I got together and we went through our records and we tried to find when we did it again or had done it previous. And we have not done it as the city. OMI was the last one to replace a blower in February of 2010 before the city took over in that October. So he and I thought we had done it before, but this will be only the second motor we have replaced, or the blower that we have replaced in the plant. Just for some reason we thought we had done it and we were wondering why we were replacing them so often, but we're either doing a motor or a blower. But this one's a blower. Just request it, you approve it for AirMac for $10,153.
Do we have a motion for this?
I'd move, but I also have a question.
Okay, as soon as we get a second.
Make the motion, I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, so you have a question?
I just have a question. Do we know when the report will be available on the pretreatment yet? From
I have not heard from Jason. No, have you, sir? Ricky?
still nothing? Okay. That's fine.
Does that answer your question?
I can reach out to him and get an answer to you.
I just kind of wondered where we were at on it, because it's just going to continue to cost money in the shape it's in.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You're right.
So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. And we're at the end of our agenda. Do I have a motion to adjourn? So moved.
Second.
Good night.